welcome to Not in ShawScope. This is your regular monthly podcast starring me, Darren Jones, him over there in Japan, and him down there in Canada.
Nick.
We say regular monthly, but it's a bit, I don't know.
It is monthly.
Well, it's kind of
once a month.
It's the idea was that the main one's supposed to be once a month, and then these are bonuses. But then sometimes there's a month gap between.
Well, you know, you skip a period every now and again. You know, these things happen. You know.
It is scary when that happens, isn't it?
It is. But you know, as long as you have your test and
coat hanger, bottle of gin, you're golden in the morning.
There we are. Hit drop done pretty quick on this episode. Didn't take long. Right.
So what do we do?
Let's get all lofty again.
I'm in charge of this.
Oh yeah. Oh.
So what do we do? What do we do on the Not in ShawScope podcast? Well, we bounce off of stuff we've done on the In ShawScope podcast. And recently, we reviewed EMPRESS WU from 1963, which is a very lavish Shaw Brothers production, very well thought of, historical epic, and turns out there was an EMPRESS WU film made in 1939, and that's what we're doing today.
And so non-Shaw, right? Nothing.
Yeah, non-Shaw. Yeah, actually, I didn't make a note of the production company on this one.
It's the Xinhua Motion Picture Co. Limited Super Production is what this is.
Oh, almost as catchy as MP and GI.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, this is well, if I'm being honest, this actually sounds more interesting than it turns out to be, right? For me, anyway, in my experience, because I think this is probably the earliest Hong Kong Chinese film that I've seen, you know, in terms of production date. I don't think.
Yeah, 1939 is definitely getting back there.
Yeah. I mean, I know there are silent films kicking about, and that's on the list as well for me. You know, just
there's the what's it called? That one, I've seen that one. Is it Song at Midnight? The kind of Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen any. All I've seen is clips. But yeah, it's and it's just an interesting kind kind of period in particularly Chinese filmmaking. I mean,
1939.
Yeah.
Like, and this is Shanghai, right? Like, I think that's where this
presumably, yeah.
I think this was made, and I just keep thinking, like, well, how long before? I mean, 1939.
I think it's in that kind of gap, right, between heights of conflict, right? I think so. It's kind of in the sweet.
Yeah, so 37 is when the real shit went down, isn't it? And then it's, if I'm right, I think I'm right. 37.
Yeah, it's been a while since I studied my world history.
But still, it's very interesting. You know, it's hard to kind of take your eye off the historical drama and think, actually, what was going on? You know, what was happening outside the studio during this period? You know, but yeah, so interesting sort of time period to be making films in. Something we're not used to on Not in ShawScope is usually there's some sort of link or there's some sort of familiarity with a director or a star or some member of the cast or a writer, you know, that we can kind of link to something else we've seen or link to Shaw Brothers. But there's nothing here. You know, I don't know, unless Clive or Nick, you can pull something out of the ether and find any of these stars in later films, you know, that people have seen or we've seen, then all of these people in the cast as well as the director are all complete strangers to me.
Yeah, same here.
So, yes, it's not much of a Venn. It's not a Venn, like we've been dealing with a lot of Venn diagrams. This is just
Yeah, this is on a different page to the Venn diagram, isn't it?
I think it's because there's a big gap in terms of extant films, right? So I'm sure, I'm sure some of these people probably did towards the tail end of their careers, maybe ended up in early Shaw, stuff like that, or but yeah, there does seem to be a bit of a gap. Like the reason we started our Shaw thing spottily in the late 50s is because we couldn't really get to much earlier stuff, right? And then particularly, I would say a big gap is so, like you said, there's a few things from the 30s and there's some silent things out of China, but there's not much 40s stuff knocking about at all. I mean, for obvious reasons, there was less made at certain parts of them, but they were later on in the 40s, they were making things.
Yeah, I mean, you go on HKMDB, there's plenty going on in the 40s. You know, you go on someone like well, actually, funny enough, the one of the directors of one of the other films we're going to talk about tonight for another podcast, Jan Yun was doing films. No, Yan Jun, sorry. Yan Jun was doing films in the 40s. And I remember looking up Feng Feng, who's Feng Hakon's dad. And I remember looking up his filmography, and he's kicking about in the 40s. And, you know, obviously you've got Kwan Tak Hing is kicking about in the 40s.
Some of those Wong Fei Hung films are from
exactly, yeah. 40s. Yeah, and the Fong Sai-yuk films as well. And there's you know, there's shitloads going on. It's just, it doesn't seem to be
it's either missing or just locked up in archives and not largely commercially available, right? Unfortunately, a lot of it I think is just missing.
But so because this is probably this is a proper kind of blind watch for us, isn't it? You know, it's a it's a real.
I closed my eyes to the whole thing.
Yeah, me too.
Yep.
Me too.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting because I hadn't no idea what to expect. I don't know what, because Hollywood, 1930s Hollywood, for example, has a very distinct style into itself. You can put a film on without being told the year, and you know whether it's 30s, 40s, 50s.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know if that's true for China, Hong Kong productions, but I had no sort of predetermined notion of what this film would look like in terms of production values or sophistication or otherwise. So very interesting experience going in, just not knowing what to expect.
Turns out it does kind of look like
it definitely looks like the 30s.
Even the acting choices and acting style.
Yeah, I was thinking specifically of something. An example would be as historical epics go, like something like Tower of London from the same year, right? Kind of felt very similar in tone.
Yeah. And it's also the other thing, which is kind of a very a less a stylistic thing, more a technological thing, is all the films from the 30s have always got this kind of background hiss in the sound as well, haven't they? Because of the technology they were using. So yeah, that locates it, I suppose. So anyway, so we are doing Empress. I'm going to butcher this pronunciation. Empress Wu 10 from 1939, directed by Fang Pei Lin. And I'm not going to go through the whole cast, but the person we're most interested in is Violet Kulan Chun as Empress Wu. There's a few more names in there that we'll get to as we kind of describe the film, I'm sure.
But Yin Zhu-chen as the Emperor, the fat. In this version, he's a fat emperor, right?
He's a big man. Yeah, he's a big dude, and man, he suffers from serious migraines.
And this director Pelin Fong seems to have been a set designer, right? That seems to have been where he came from. died in a plane.
That makes sense. Oh, okay, that's a surprise. But that makes sense to me in terms of this film is it's really high on spectacle for something this old. I felt.
Sets are good. Sets are very good.
Yeah, that's what, and that makes sense now. If this guy, that's his background. A lot of love and attention was given to the look of the thing.
I mean, I would caution though. You might be right, but like we said, we don't exactly know this period, so it could actually look like a whole bunch of other stuff that looked as good, right? But yeah, it's a fairly good working theory that he knew, in the same way as like anything James Wong Howe or something got round to directing would look good just because of his cinematography background, right? So it's a fair bet, but yeah, maybe other 30s epics are just as good. Maybe the Xinhua Motion Picture Co. Limited had a whole bunch of super productions under their belt, right?
Yeah, I think I was just surprised. I thought it would be a more threadbare affair just because of the time, just because of it's 1939 and of where maybe it was made.
Well, I mean, 1939. I mean, you know, cinema's already been a big thing for 20 years. Let's say they've had features, so you shouldn't really be surprised to see. No, I'm sorry, I'm not telling you off. I'm just.
That's all right. How dare you? So that so a decent amount of money's been thrown at the screen here. I felt.
Yeah. I mean, they've got a whole fucking castle, haven't they? You know, there's a big battle scene, biggish battle scene at the end. They've got a castle with battlements that looks kind of real. They're shooting arrows off, and
You could say that it's easily the equivalent, if you in the same way as you adjust for inflation or whatever. It's the equivalent of what was going on in the 1963 version in terms of spectrum.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yes, it's good. But but again, it's before the Shaw's backlot exists, doesn't it? You know, which a big deal was made about. Oh, we spent all this money, we built all this stuff. There's the bridge and there's the castle and all this stuff. So very impressive. Yeah.
You may sense, dear viewer, as well, that we are kind of dancing about a little bit because we don't actually have a huge amount to say about this film per se, right?
It is. The one thing that struck me, I guess, was it.
Don't be afraid to be surprised, Nick. That I'm not. I won't tell you off again.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Go on. If you're surprised, admit it. Go on.
No, it was simply that in some ways she's a harsher woman in this than she is in the other version we watched.
She strangles a baby.
That's
right?
One of the scenes that's jumping to my. But no, her own baby.
Yeah.
She kills her own child.
This is interesting. In addition to watching this film, I did a bit of background reading, and I read Jonathan Clements's book on the Empress Wu.
Okay, cool.
It's quite interesting. Some interesting bits and pieces in there, and that seems to be a very important part of the story. The baby strangling that, oddly was skipped in the 63 version.
Yes,
right?
In the 63 version, that's like the same. She basically affects the same, because what she's trying to do is take out the previous empress, right?
Right.
And she does it in that case by framing her for doing some sort of voodoo stuff with a doll against the emperor, right? There was that whole scene. But in this version, she smothers and or strangles or shakes a baby. It seemed to me like she was shaking a baby to death.
They didn't go all the way, but I think the thing, because that part of the story is so well known, I think they only had to allude to it, and then just before. And so that was the interesting thing. The Jonathan Clements book does quite a good. I would quite recommend it. It does quite a good job of laying down, because she's such a divisive figure, and there are so many competing narratives to what she was up to. And the Jonathan Clements book does do quite a good job of putting things into context and explaining why some versions, depending on who wrote them, might, be either more sympathetic or did a hatchet job on her depending on, you know, who's in power and stuff. It's quite a good route. In fact, I wrote down some, I mean, just all over the place here, but here's some things I learned from the book which may interest you. Some to do with Empress Wu, some not. So one thing the book does, which is quite good, is each chapter is headed by it has an example of, because she introduced a lot of new characters into the language. It's quite interesting. They kind of explain specifically what those characters mean, and you know, because some of them are quite pointed in the way that she rearranged them, so that it's kind of difficult to explain without reading it yourself. But that was quite a nice little touch. Nothing to do with Empress Wu, but I did learn that apparently Bruce Lee was sent to, because his family thought there was a curse on the firstborn male child of the family, he was sent to a girls' school with a pierced ear.
How did this come up in a book about?
What are you blithering on about?
Well, it's what Jonathan Clements is blithering on about.
How did this come up in a book about Empress Wu?
Can't remember.
What's the connective tissue there, Clive?
I can't remember.
Yeah, what's the connective tissue, Clive?
But it's interesting, though.
It is. I mean, I have seen that fucking movie. What was it called? That piece of shit that came out in the 90s about the
Dragon.
That's the one.
Dragon.
That highly accurate film where he's chased by the samurai monster from Brazil.
That's the one. Yes. Yeah. So, but I mean, that I guess leaned into that whole idea of there being a curse on the firstborn.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, fair play. Yeah.
So the other thing that was quite interesting in the book as well is that it does quite a good example at explaining, like, because how the different strata of concubines in an emperor's palace works, because there's lots of different levels of them, and it turns out that within a palace you'll have, so the emperor's the only non-castrated male, right? There'll be the emperor, about 122 concubines, and eunuchs. Which is
the concubines are on a 3-day rotation, is what we're saying.
Well, the concubines are like, there's different levels. There's like childbearing concubines, throw a fuck into concubines, I guess, and there's just different levels, and depending on their family background, and also the interesting that does tie into the Empress Wu story is, so non-childbearing concubines, when the emperor they were serving dies, are sent to a nunnery.
Well, there you go.
But interesting that he points out that they were less likely to be Buddhist nunneries, though they were more likely to be Taoist. I didn't even realize there were such things as Taoist convents, but there were.
Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? You know, I mean, it's and also the priest, because there's a priest character in Empress Wu as well, in this version of Empress Wu. He seems to be a Taoist priest as well. Yeah. By his get-up, so that would kind of. But that's important as well to the story, which they do get into in the 39 version and the 63. But again, it's not hammered home because I think it would be too obvious for a local audience. But the fact that she was because the way Jonathan Clements explains it is, and again, no one knows for sure, but that she was originally a concubine for this emperor's father, right? But probably they didn't have much of a relationship at all, actually. But the thing is, apparently it's very verboten for an emperor dies.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can't, because it's almost like your father or something, right? So you can't So for her to have re-entered the palace to serve the son in itself was extremely scandalous, and they had to kind of go through some weird contorted motions to allow it at all. So just that fact alone was quite...
And that's made a big deal of in both films, in the 63 version and this version.
But I didn't quite understand why in the background without having read up about it as well. So that was quite interesting. So yeah, if you're really interested in Empress WU, I would recommend. It's a good starting point, the Jonathan Clements book. Another thing you point, which I was quite surprised to learn. So the 1984, because there's a whole bunch of Empress WU TV series. In fact, I was thinking we could spin off. We could spin off, if you like this, we can spin off a show where we talk about TV adaptations of Empress WU and all Doctor Who episodes. So we can call it Woo-Hoo, and then we can have Woo-Hoo by the Rocketeens as our theme tune, which is a good thing.
Well, there's a different way to yes. You could also use Who as in HU. So you could there's a Who is a surname in China as well, isn't it? So
what would that be representing? So we wouldn't do Doctor Who episodes. We'd be doing episodes of
King Who.
King Who. Yeah. He didn't do much telly though, I don't think.
No.
Anyway, it's a work in progress.
I don't know. It's a work in progress.
It's just an excuse to have Woo-Hoo by the Rocketeens as a theme tune.
It is, but it's also you also need to be guarded against making other fucking podcasts, Clive.
Yes.
But anyway, what I was going to say, what I was surprised at was, so there's a 1984 TV series of Empress WU, which is quite well regarded. I had no idea an English dubbed version played Channel 4 in the late 80s.
Well, fuck.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's what Rodney was talking about when we had Rodney on Achafuz.
Was he on about that, was he?
Yeah, he said he saw some TV show, he described it as a Kung Fu TV show.
It would have had Kung Fu in it, yeah.
In that period.
I mean, I can't think of anything else it would have been.
We have to get that information to Rodney.
Yeah, well, maybe he'll watch. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
so there we go. That's about all the little bits of info.
That's cool. So Clive's had his factoids now.
Yep.
Why don't we just get straight on to what we actually thought of the film?
Well, this is the most difficult bit. I mean, for me,
because we were dancing around it, and let's just rip the plaster off.
Yeah.
And work it out.
Well, you go first then, Darren.
All right. I struggled to get through it, is the truth.
Oh, okay. That surprises me.
Because I'm a fan of 30s cinema generally, because I just find it fascinating, and I just like kind of inhabiting that time period for some reason, just because it seems like a very innovative transitional kind of period.
People should know as well, for context, that Darren, when he's not on here, enjoys wearing a fedora hat and speaking in like Chicago style gangsters. He refers to women as skates, and such as his love of the 30s.
Were I to try and emulate that accent alone, let alone that look, I would be so embarrassed. I would have to fly to Dignitas and end it all. I'm afraid. So I'm not going to attempt that.
I want to see Darren dressed as a 30s gangster now.
Yeah. Well, I don't mind dressing.
Not to hasten your death.
I do actually own a 1930 suit. Would you believe? But yeah, I do actually own a 1930 suit, but not the fedora.
I can see you like on stage doing like Minnie the Moocher, Cab Calloway style.
I was talking more of the accent than the look.
Yes. Yeah.
But anyway, Anyway, so yeah, I'm a fan of the 30s. I'm always ready to get into the groove of any 1930s film that I come across. But I found
I'm a fan of the 30s. Does make you sound like a warmonger.
I hang on. Yeah, there was a side part in there that looked a bit.
Thousands and thousands of people around the world. I'm into that. I dig that scene, man.
No, then. I fully refute all of Clive's implications, and will always punch Nazis, as is right. Anyway, but I kind of struggled with it. I liked Violet Ku's performance. I find her quite striking as an actress, actually. She's got a very good face. It sounds almost racist to say, but she's got a very old-fashioned face. You know, her bone structure or something looks like it's from 1400 years ago. You know,
she's good as well, I would say, as Empress Wu.
Great actress, great actress, great performance. But I don't know. I can't say that it's badly directed, but I think there was something about the pace of the film that I just couldn't get in the groove of. And she strangles a baby in it. There's a big fire. There's a big rotund emperor that looks like Orson Welles from 1972.
Yep.
There's lots of stuff to like in there, and there's even comic relief, which I wasn't expecting. So the Taoist priest is often wandering around, pissed as a fart, getting in all sorts of trouble, and giving cheek to the Empress. But yeah, I don't know. There was something not quite that just didn't hook me about it. And maybe it's a difference in performance style, possibly. Because I felt that although there's a lot of there are a lot of emotional stakes, there's a lot of high stakes in this, it didn't kind of grab me. And that may have been to do with a more staid or a more reserved performance on the part of most actors of the period. But I don't know, because Empress Wu was just running around cackling and giving stink eye to people right, left, and centre. You've got
he's a bit of a Disney villain. I thought in this version, it was just slightly on the he's mirror on the wall kind of element to her performance.
Seen all the Dalmatians as well. I didn't expect that.
Yes, definitely some Cruella in there too.
But actually, as I think about it now, as I'm beginning to think about it, maybe actually it's not about Empress Wu or even the Taoist priest or the the rebellious maid of hers or the emperor. It's I suppose it's the color of the supplementary characters, and I don't think I got enough color and enough sort of texture from the supplementary characters to create the world.
I think you just missed the fact that she didn't do the whole Cleopatra in the diaphanous white gown, seducing her.
They could have done that in the 30s. That was allowed.
They definitely, that's the one thing they didn't, her sexiness, or this idea of her using her feminine wiles to kind of massage politics or something like that. That's not in this version. She's much more authoritarian.
That's not why I like the 63 version though.
Oh, that's why I like.
But I don't know. What do you think? What do you think?
It's funny, in some ways I enjoyed this one maybe even a touch more, partly because I was not expecting her to strangle a baby. I guess Clive, knew this, but I was like, whoa, this is like, they're really going great guns on not sugarcoating this. And then I was interested. I did a little reading where I also discovered, oh, this is actually a very common part of her myth or her story that the other film we watched kind of elided for whatever reason, because it's hard to identify with somebody who murders their own child for political
The 63
ends.
film is definitely more sympathetic than the 39 version, even though the 39 version doesn't exactly, it does try to add a bit of balance, doesn't it? It doesn't.
Well, that's what surprised me, because I think it's a more complicated film for that reason, because it doesn't do either. It doesn't paint her purely as this villain, because we still see the stuff like her proto-feminist laws and like changing the all of that stuff. We get that too, and we do. We're aware that she is an incredibly important historical figure, that she may have basically extended the life of the Tang dynasty.
Very wary of the proto-feminist argument, though. I don't think Empress Wu was, either way you read her story, was out for much of anyone other than herself. I don't really.
Sure, but there is this spate of laws supposedly that she wrote that kind of are more fair to women, I guess. Is this not a matter of historical record? I mean, Clive, you read the book.
It's one of the ones that is, again, debatable, right?
Okay.
Yeah, everything is. That's the thing. Everything in her story is debatable. That's the difficult bit, I think, about making a definitive version of the story, right?
But regardless, you end up with I found, like, as a composite, like a more interesting character, because yeah, when she's a bitch, she's a bitch. And then when she's trying to hold her empire together, she's like, she's doing her best for her country. And so
I agree with you. I kind of got on with this version quite a bit as well. I thought it was, I think my problem, not a problem exactly, but it's more to do with the historical biopic kind of genre in general. It's difficult to make a film that ticks all the boxes and is a good film. I like that sweeps you up, because
right,
so much, you're saddled with so much, right? Like, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do this, and there's not much room left to tell there's good, there's good historical epics, but if I think anyway, there are very few historical biopics that rise above the level of, that's pretty good. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
There's very few that actually connect.
That are great cinema.
Yeah,
that are truly
got so much to do that they forget to tell like one focused story. It's like the genre from the beginning is saddled with, like, even like a really good, like, think about it, like how many go beyond like you having a certain level of like admiration for it to crossing over to fuck, I enjoyed the hell out of that. Like, I can't think of many, and the ones that do, they probably kind of shuck off a lot of the baggage and decide to go their own way or be really specific, like about one element or something like that. There's something a little bit worthy, I suppose, about wanting to tell a story like this. Like, it's interesting, me and Nick recently, for our other show, we watched a version of Gilgamesh made for Hungarian TV, which
so good.
It's really good, but I think one of the reasons it was really good, it was almost like an anti-epic, because it was using all this primitive chroma key 70s style, you know, like if you remember the Nightmare TV show.
Yeah.
It was that level of, but it really
or John Pertwee era Doctor Who. Where
even though it was faithful to the story, because it became like a weird hermetically sealed.
It just exists in its own universe.
And I think that worked really well. And I was writing my review of it, and I was thinking, actually, if someone were, because the surprising thing is it is one of the very few. You'd think there'd be loads of Gilgamesh films, but turns out it isn't, right?
No.
And I was thinking, well, even if someone did come along with like a huge budget and did the epic of Gilgamesh for all time, you'd still, I don't know if you'd beat the charm of that version.
Well, and that's the thing, isn't it? That's the thing with these epics anyway, going off on a complete tangent. You know, if you throw money at something, then you get Clash of the Titans, right? Either version, right? On a similar tack, or you get Troy, for example. Right? Again, talking on which are piles of shit.
But it's interesting that the 80s, I suppose the 80s Clash of the Titans though is a little bit closer to something that you would enjoy in a.
It's in the spirit of the myth, exactly.
But because it deviates, exactly, kind of backing up my theory a little
because it has a robot owl in it.
Which is not one of the better elements, but because it does shit like that, rather than try and do like because
it's not slavishly adhering to the text, is it?
Which is, I mean, that's a slightly different thing you're talking about. Although I suppose this history is ancient enough that it's almost mythical. But I think that's the thing, is because in a way it's ridiculous to kind of, because these were, once upon a time, these were entertainments, right? But now, of course, they've become calcified and people take them almost too seriously, right? Supposed to have fun with these fucking things, right? You're supposed to. Anyway.
Well, that's why you have to watch Tony Robinson walking up and down depressing English beaches, just telling you the story of Odysseus. And that's the way to see it. I mean, that's the way.
Look, this turncoat going over, your glorious beaches in Canada and giving our. I'm going to write a letter to GB News and complain about you dissing our British beaches and calling them miserable.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, we're set.
Clive loves these beaches so much that he hasn't lived in England.
Yes, I was just about to add that you're right as well.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm alone in this then. I didn't dislike this film. I hasten to add. I didn't dislike it. I just didn't get on with it.
Yeah. No, I did get on with it, but almost. But with the caveat that I often don't get on. I got on with this about as well as could be expected.
Yeah. I did enjoy the Loser Emperor quite a bit too. He was even more pathetic, I felt, than the one in the later version. Like just truly.
Yeah, because he's no use. He's no use. He doesn't get anywhere, does he?
No.
He did remind me of King Rollo a little bit. You can imagine him as a paper cut out.
Yeah, definitely.
Right there.
Actually, it was a good portray. Actually, it was a good portrayal of. He actually did kind of. So we're talking about the prince, not the emperor now, aren't we?
Whoever the one is who has the headaches and is just.
Oh no! I was actually talking about the prince. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
So the prince character who's not in it a lot.
Right.
He's continuously getting his headgear taken on and off, and kind of like almost emperor, and then I'm the emperor. And I thought that was quite a good performance. But anyway,
yeah, that would be interesting to see. I mean, it is a story. I'm keen to watch some of the TV versions as well, because then they can really get into because if you like court intrigue and politics,
yeah,
this story's got it all. You know, like we said, it's got the potential infanticide, and it's got loads of sex, and it's got, it's like it's like a medieval succession,
or like I Claudius or something.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it probably does need it needs the room to breathe that it doesn't have in these. Both of the ones we've watched have been 90-minute versions, so highly truncated, chopped pieces, and massive jumps in time. Apparently, there's tons of wars and all kinds of stuff that's going on across the years that she is in, because it's a lengthy period of time. She's basically either the power behind the throne or is the power on the throne, right?
It's like 60 years or something, isn't
it?
Yeah. So it also look out for our new show, Woohoo, where we will be taking a look at some of these TV series and the Sea Devils, I think, for our
I think that makes sense.
By the way, they have just put all of the Doctor Who's on BBC iPlayer.
Heard this, yes. Although I do find that I was reading that they were saying, like all of Doctor, and I was like, well, no, hang on, large amounts of it are not
big chunks of it. Yes.
But I've never seen a man as happy as John Pertwee in the Sea Devils, because he's in a boat, right? And he's a seaman, I believe, right?
It's a shame we couldn't swap out the missing episodes for all the Sylvester McCoy stuff can go missing as far as I'm concerned, as long as we get some of the Patrick Troughton stuff.
Peter Davison fuck right off, for sure. I mean, Tristan.
Caves of Androzani is good.
Okay. Yes, and why? Because he dies in it. So
and I saw it at a formative age, and Perry, when he dies, has quite a lot of cleavage.
Tits are literally on his head.
Yeah.
I mean, it's his finest moment is Peter he was Tristan, right, on All Creatures Great and Small.
Don't know.
That was nothing.
Apologize, viewers, for my two co-hosts.
That took me right out of the show. I was like, I'd never seen Tom Baker before. He will just anyway. But the one thing I will say that strikes me about the Empress Wu of the Tang dynasty is that the generals never had like a female offshoot band, right? They could have had I don't know, Banshee Face Killer and Old Dirty Bitch. It never happened. Seems like a missed opportunity to me.
That was phenomenally bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Turning this off now.
I spent 2 weeks workshopping that down at the Truckle Hut.
We're going to turn this off now, and me and Darren are going to give Nick a good talking to.
Yeah.
Second straight.
Just terminate it. Just turn it off now.